Hi everyone, welcome to lecture number 16, the third lecture on labor market equilibrium. In our last lecture, we discussed about the impact of payroll taxes on labor market outcomes. We discussed about the impact on both from employer as well as from the employee side. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the impact of payroll taxes on economic efficiency and welfare impacts, and also we are going to discuss about the impact of subsidies on labor market outcomes. Welfare implications of a payroll tax on labor market can vary, and it depends on several factors, including the progressivity of this tax system, the elasticity of the labor supply and demand, and how the tax revenue is used. So, here I am going to discuss some key points on social implications of these payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are mostly for the income redistribution, but if the payroll taxes are regressive, meaning that they take a larger proportion of the income from the lower income individuals than from the higher income individuals, then it is going to affect the income redistribution in an adverse way. So, if the payroll taxes are progressive, which means they take a small proportion of the income from the lower individuals than from the higher income individuals, then it would affect the income redistribution in a positive way. So, if the payroll taxes are regressive, then they can explain this income inequality by placing a relatively heavier burden on low wage workers. This can have negative welfare implications, as it may reduce the disposable income available to the low income households for their consumption. Payroll taxes have a significant impact on the employment level. Payroll taxes can affect both the demand for and the supply of labor in the labor market. So, on the demand side, higher payroll taxes increases the cost of labor for employers, potentially leading to a decrease in the employment levels, especially for the low skilled workers. Whereas, on the supply side, higher taxes can reduce the individual's incentive to work, particularly if the after tax wage is lower than the value of their leisure time. So, this can result in lower labor force participation rate and reduce the economic output. Payroll taxes can introduce inefficiencies into the labor market by distorting labor supply and demand decisions. For example, if the individuals reduce their labor supply in response to higher taxes, this can lead to a suboptimal allocation of resources and lower overall economic welfare. Similarly, if the firms reduce hiring or investing in response to the higher labor cost, this can hinder the productivity growth and the long term economic prosperity. Further, the incidence and the elasticity of the tax burden. The welfare implication of the payroll tax depends on how the burden of tax is distributed between employers and employees, which depends on the elasticity of demand and supply for labor. If the employers are able to pass the tax burden onto the workers in the form of lower wages, then the welfare implication on the workers will be greater. However, if the wages are relatively sticky and the employers bear a significant proportion of the tax burden, then the welfare impact of this tax burden on the workers may be mitigated. Further, the welfare implication of a payroll tax depends on how the tax revenue is used. If the tax revenue is used to fund public goods and services that benefits the society as a whole, like education, healthcare, infrastructure, then the welfare implication may be positive. However, if the revenue is used to in an inefficient way or in ways that do not generate significant social values, then the welfare impact may be negative. Overall, the welfare implication of a payroll tax on the labor market are complex and multifaceted. So, the policymakers need to be carefully consider the distributional effects, efficiency cost and the revenue use when designing these payroll tax policies to ensure that they promote economic growth and social welfare. Because payroll taxes typically increase the cost of hiring a worker, and these taxes reduces the total employment regardless of whether the tax is imposed on the workers or on the farms. So, the after tax equilibrium therefore is inefficient because the number of workers employed is not the number of that maximizes the total gain from the trade in the labor market without tax. Now, to understand these welfare implications of payroll tax in the labor market, we have taken these basic economic models, the demand and supply models. Now, if you look at this graph, on this panel A, we have considered where there is no tax is imposed, and with the demand and supply function, the economy is having E0 amount of employment at W0 wage rate. As we have already discussed about this, that in a competitive economy where the wage and employment are decided based on the demand and supply, the welfare gain for both the workers and the producers, they are maximum. So, the producer surplus, which is the triangle P, and the worker surplus, the triangle Q, they are at the maximum level. So, both the players, the workers and the farms, they enjoy maximum surplus. Now, let us say the tax is imposed. As we have already seen that when the tax is imposed, whether it is on the farm side or it is on the worker side, it is going to reduce the employment and it is going to increase the wage rate. So, after imposition of tax on this panel B, we have taken into consideration when the tax is imposed, whatever the magnitude of the reduction in the employment, but the employment is going to reduce from E0 to E1 and at a higher wage rate. So, after imposition of tax, the economy is having E1 level of employment and the wage rate is WT, which means the total cost to the farm, and the tax, after paying the tax, WN is the net wage which the workers they receive. So, this is the cost to the farm and this is the actual wage which the workers they receive. Now, because of this imposition of payroll tax, the producer surplus and the worker surplus has been reduced to the triangle P star is the producer surplus now and Q star is the worker surplus, and this much of tax revenue is generated because of this $1 of imposition of tax. So, what we have seen here is that this triangle is the loss, potential loss to the economy, which we call deadweight loss. The economy has the potential to employ this much of workers, but because of the tax, the resources are now allocated in an efficient way. So, this much of resource or the workers now they are unemployed. So, when we compare these two graphs without tax and with tax, we can see the producer surplus, which was earlier this much, now it has reduced to this. So, from P to P star, the producer surplus has been reduced. The worker surplus, which was the triangle Q, now it has been reduced to Q star. Earlier there was no tax revenue, but after the imposition of tax, this much is the tax revenue. So, the total gains from the trade before imposition of the tax is the triangle P plus triangle Q. This much was the gain from the trade. But after tax, the gain from trade is this area. We are considering this tax as a gain because this is going to come back to both the workers and the farm in some other way. The government collects taxes and give it back to the economy in so many ways, providing infrastructure, giving education, healthcare facilities. So, we are assuming that it will come back to the workers and the producers in some other way. But the loss which has happened after imposition of the tax is the triangle, which this shaded triangle we call is the deadweight loss to the economy. So, deadweight loss measures the value of gains foregone because the tax forces employers to cut employment below the efficient level and has nothing to do with the cost of enforcing or collecting the payroll tax. So, it is the value of that gain which has been foregone because of the tax imposition. So, the deadweight loss arises because the tax prevents some workers who are willing to work from being hired by the employer who are willing to hire them. So, these foregone deals were the beneficial to the society because workers' value of marginal product exceeds the workers' value of time outside the labor market. So, these workers should have been employed. So, now when we are foregoing this much of labor, so this is a deadweight loss and this tax prevents some workers who are willing to work and it is preventing the employer those who are willing to hire them. Now, coming to the effect of employment subsidies on the labor market outcome. Employment subsidies are often provided by the government for several reasons and overall employment subsidies are used as the policy tools to achieve various social, economic and labor market objectives. It ranges from reducing unemployment and poverty to promoting economic growth and development. So, some of the implication of this employment subsidies I am going to discuss, that how employment subsidies are going to affect the labor market outcomes. First and foremost, the employment subsidies are going to affect the employment level in the economy. Subsidies are aimed at specific industries or regions that can stimulate jobs by reducing the cost associated with hiring new workers. So, for example, subsidies for renewable energy projects may create jobs in the green energy sector. Conversely, the subsidies that artificially support inefficient industries may distort the labor market dynamics and lead to a misallocation of resources. Sometimes it may happen that some industries they show that artificially they are inefficient. So, getting some subsidies may distort the labor market dynamics in those cases, but overall the subsidies they aim to increase the efficiency and increase the allocation of the resources in the labor market. When it comes to the subsidies and its effects on the labor market, subsidies can influence ways and benefits in the labor market in various ways. In industries where subsidies are provided to the employers, workers may see higher wages or better benefits due to the increase in the demand for labor. However, if subsidies lead to the overemployment or creation of low wage jobs, then it may depress overall wage levels and worsen the working conditions in the labor market. Further, employment subsidies may affect the labor market participation. Subsidies can affect labor market participation by incentivizing the individuals to enter or remain in the workforce. For example, subsidies for child care or transport can increase and can make it easier for the people to work by reducing the costs associated with the employment. Conversely, subsidies that discourage work, such as overly generous unemployment benefits, may reduce labor force participation. Further, subsidies can affect the labor market through skill development. Subsidies which target at education, training or skill development programs can enhance the quality of labor force by improving worker skill and productivity. So, this in turn can lead to higher wages and better jobs prospects for the individuals in the labor market. Further, subsidies can impact labor market flexibility by influencing firms' hiring and firing decisions. Subsidies that encourage job creation, such as wage subsidies for hiring disadvantaged workers, may lead to a greater employment stability. Whereas on the other hand, subsidies that discourage workforce adjustments, such as subsidies for industries facing structural decline, may impede labor market allocation and reallocation and hinder the economic adaptability. Further, subsidies can stimulate innovation and productivity growth by supporting research and development, technology adoption and investment in capital intensive industries. So, this can create high skilled and high paying jobs and drive economic growth in the long run. Further, subsidies can impact income inequality. It depends on how they are targeted and distributed. So, subsidies that primarily benefits low income individuals, such as housing assistance or food stamps, can help to alleviate poverty and reduce income inequality. However, subsidies that primarily benefit wealthy individuals or the corporate house may worsen the income inequalities. Further, subsidies can distort market signals and lead to inefficient resource allocations. Sometimes it may happen that subsidies that artificially lower the cost of production in certain industries may lead to overproduction and excess capacity, which can have negative impact on the employment and economic stability in the long run. Further, employment subsidies have significant impact when the economy is going through certain business cycles. Economies are experiencing some kind of economic shocks. During the period of economic crisis or transition, these employment subsidies can serve as a temporary measures to mitigate the impact of layoffs and unemployment in the labor market. By supporting business to retain or hire workers, so subsidies can help to stabilize the economy and facilitate the recovery. If you look at overall the impact of the subsidies on labor market outcomes, it depends on the factors such as the design of the subsidy program, its target beneficiaries and the broader economic context. So, the effective subsidy policies should aim to promote inclusive growth, enhance workforce skills and support industries with positive spillover effects on the economy. Therefore, let us try to understand what happens to the wage and employment when government provides employment subsidies through our standard economic models. The labor demand curve is shifted not only by the payroll taxes, but also by the government subsidies designed to encourage the farms to hire more workers. So, an employment subsidy lowers the cost of hiring for the farm, and in typical subsidy programs, the government grants the farms a tax credit. Let us take for example to understand this impact of subsidy on the employment and wage outcomes on the labor market. Suppose the government grants the farm a tax credit of, let us say, $1 for every person hour it hires. Now, because this subsidy reduces the cost of hiring the person hour by $1, it shifts the demand curve up by the exactly same amount. So, let us try to understand how the employment subsidies affects the labor market outcomes. In this graph, on this x axis we have taken employment, number of employment, and on the y axis we have taken wage. Initially the economy is at equilibrium at point A with the demand curve D0 and the supply curve S. Having the equilibrium at point A, E0 amount of workers were employed at W0 amount of wage rate. Now, this implementation of this $1 subsidy, employment subsidy, is going to shift the demand function up. Now, the demand function is shifted from D0 to D1 and the new equilibrium is being achieved at point B. At point B, E1 amount of workers were employed at the wage rate W1. Earlier, when there was no subsidy, E0 amount of workers were employed at W0 wage rate. Now, the workers, because of this $1 subsidies, the wage rate has increased from W0 to W1. The workers are actually getting W1 amount of wage rate. The farm is paying W0 amount of wage rate, but the farm is getting subsidy of $1. So, the actual cost to hire E1 amount of worker is the wage rate at W1 minus 1. So, this is the cost for the farm to hire E1 amount of worker. So, this $1 subsidy is having the same impact, the way it has impacted and the benefit is going to share by both the farm and the worker. So, this $1 benefit which is given to the farm, however, is going to be enjoyed by both workers and the farms together. A part of this $1 benefit is going to be enjoyed by the workers and a part of that is going to be enjoyed by the farm. Now, earlier W0 was the wage rate, W0 was the wage rate which the workers were receiving and the farms they were paying. Now, W1 is the wage rate the workers are receiving, whereas W1 minus 1 is the wage rate which the farms they are paying to the workers. So, this entire $1 benefit, a part of that is going to enjoy by the workers and a part of that is going to enjoy by the farm. So, you can see the overall impact, the wage has increased, the employment has gone up in the economy. And in terms of welfare gain, we can see that it increases the worker surplus as well as the producer surplus. So, the employment subsidies, the labor market impact these subsidies can be sizable and will be obviously depend on the elasticity of labor supply and the labor demand. So, how much will be the gain? It depends on the amount of subsidy, how much it is going to be given and on the nature of the demand function and the supply function, the elasticity of labor demand and labor supply. Some empirical studies has been done to find out that the impact of employment subsidies on the labor market outcomes. It has been seen that if the labor supply elasticity is 0.3 and the labor demand elasticity is 0.5, it has been estimated that the subsidy that reduces the cost of hiring 10% would increase the wage by 4% and increase the employment by 2%. This is the outcome of a study which is done by Lawrence in the year 1998. So, empirically it has been established that any amount of employment subsidies are going to have a positive impact on wage and employment. In our next lecture, we will discuss about the impact of payroll taxes versus the mandated benefits. Now, if the farm is not going to imposed by some taxes, but the farms are going to ask to give some mandated benefits to the workers, how it is going to affect the labor market outcomes? That will be the scope of the discussion for our next lecture. Thank you.